Okay, welcome. This is a little guitar lesson for those of you who are maybe comfortable with your pentatonic scale shapes all the way up the neck. That means that means that you're comfortable playing those shapes, but when you practice, you probably don't want to just be playing up and down scale shapes all the time. We want to do something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more musical. So here are some different exercises, some different sequences that you can play to practice these pentatonic shapes in a way that's maybe a little bit more musical, a little bit more interesting. We're going to look at two different types of exercises. One is using a couple of strings and going all the way up the neck, just on those two strings. And the other one is playing within one position, playing some different sequences, starting to get some more interesting ideas. Let's start with the two-string ones first. Now, when I say playing just on two strings, what I mean is something like this. Just the first two strings of, in this case, your first pentatonic position. We're in A major for this. We'll do all these exercises in A major, but you know that you can play these in any key just by moving them up and down the guitar. So we're going to play in our first position, second position, third position, fourth position, and our final fifth position. And then let's finish it on an A note at the 14th fret on our third string here. Now, in all of these, we're going to try to keep the fingering, so which finger you're using to play each note, we're going to try to keep the fingering the same as if we were playing the full pentatonic shape, right, up and down. So even if we're only playing the last two strings here, we're going to use the same fingers as if we were playing the whole scale. Let's take a look at how that comes all together. So it's in our descending scale, so starting from the highest note in each position, the first four notes, next position, etc. And when we put it all together, it should sound something like this. Let me get so that you can see it on this camera nice and clearly. Once you've practiced that a little bit, you can play it as slowly as you want, but it's important to play it cleanly. I want to hear only one note at a time. And your picking hand, so in my case my right hand, your picking hand is alternate picking. That means down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So your right hand's very mechanically up and down, up and down. Okay, that will help you to keep the correct rhythm. Okay, once you've done that on the first two strings, etc., we can move on to the next two strings. So now we're on strings 2 and 3. And again, finishing on that same A note on your third string, 14th fret. That's an A. Another advantage to this exercise is if we always try to finish on an A note, then you're going to learn where all the A's are on your fretboard. So you've got one here, here, For example, you've got one here, your open A string, you've got another one here, etc. So we're going to get used to finishing that A note. On the next two strings, so we're now up to the third and fourth strings. Let's finish on this A this time. Or you could go back up to this one. You finish on that higher A note there. On the fourth and fifth strings, it sounds like this. Let me just show you that a little bit better on this camera. And finally, on the lowest two strings, that's strings 5 and 6, your A string and your E string, we'll do the same sequence, the same pattern. Honestly, I don't know when you would ever do this if you were playing a solo. I don't know if you would ever use a sequence like this in reality, if you like, playing with a band or playing a solo. But let's do it just to complete the exercise. On strings 5 and 6, it sounds like this. Okay, the next little exercise that we'll do is very similar, but this time we're reversing the order of the notes. In each position, we're going to play the same 4 notes, but in reverse order. That means in position 1, in position 2, in position 3, in position 4, and in position 5. And we'll finish on the same A note. When we string it all together, it gives us something like this. And we'll do the same thing, we'll play that on the next 2 strings, going up through all our pentatonic shapes. You can see how by practicing these exercises you can really build up speed and confidence, and these shapes and these ideas will come in very useful when playing improvised solos or when learning other people's solos, some of your favourite guitar solos on the instrument, because these sequences of notes are the foundation of like so many licks and so many solos that you'll hear. Let's just go through those strings 2 and 3 again, and then we'll move on to the next one. Strings 2 and 3. On strings 3 and 4, it would be like this. On strings 4 and 5. Again on strings 4 and 5. And finally on strings 5 and 6, the one that I think you would probably never use playing a solo, but here it is. So far we've been playing these notes in groups of 4 in each position. We can group the notes in different ways to make more interesting patterns. A very simple way of doing that is to make a little group of 6. And let's do this time as a group of 6. We'll walk down the scale, then come back up to this note, and walk back down the scale again. So it's... We'll do that again a little bit better. Okay, very important when you're doing all of these exercises is to only hear, really we only want to hear one note at a time. So you need to think about, as well as the time when you're playing the note, you also want to think about when you're stopping the note. And we're going to do that in a couple of different ways. We do that by letting go a little bit of the note with your fretting hand. So we're controlling when we start the note and also controlling when we stop the note. And I'm also, if you look at my right hand here, I'll try to show you on this camera. You can see that with my right hand, when I'm playing on the high strings, my right hand is muting the lower strings so that we're not hearing any of that ringing out while we're playing. Or at least we're trying not to let any of that ring out while we're playing. We only want to hear the note that we're fretting and the note that we're picking. And you can start off nice and slowly, but then you can build up speed with this as well. So nice and slowly, it sounds like this. And honestly, when you're learning this stuff and when you're playing it slowly, it sounds like an exercise. But when you can get it a little bit faster, a little bit more fluid, it really starts to sound a little bit more musical, a little bit more interesting. Okay, on the next 2 strings we can do the same sequence. We'll repeat the same pattern that we did before. So it becomes like this. So on the 2nd and 3rd strings again. On the 3rd and 4th strings, we'll continue the same pattern. On the 4th and 5th strings, we get this. Fourth and 5th strings again. And finally on the 5th and 6th strings. Okay, so those are a few exercises that you can practice. Remember to think about only playing one note at a time, not letting unwanted notes ring out. That means easing off the pressure to stop the notes with your left hand. It also means muting the strings that you're not playing with your right hand. And that's the most difficult thing. When playing any of these exercises. It's the thing that took me the longest to learn. It's the thing that most people neglect when they're practicing. it's hard when you're learning to do that. It's something that I'm working on constantly. I think everybody is. Muting technique is as important as the notes that you're playing. And also you can play with these sequences, you can invent your own sequences, you can make your own exercises. Think about different ways of taking 4 notes or 6 notes from your scales and playing them in each position, up the neck in all of your pentatonic positions. The next little part of this lesson will be about playing different sequences within one position. But let's make that another lesson for another day, okay?